Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mormon Stories podcast. I am not John Dehlin. Today, John and me and our guests have recorded a part 1 and part 2, but he actually had to run. So I am jumping in the host chair and sitting down for this really amazing part 3 now with our guests. Let's welcome back for our part 3, Makenzie and Gerald.
Hi. We're so excited to have you.
We have been just
interviewing us.
all day.
I'm the host of this podcast. I am not.
Well, we've had a really fun time all day talking about Gerald's upbringing in Zimbabwe, what led him to America, his journey into the Mormon church, and then Makenzie's upbringing, her attending BYU, not really having a lot of luck on the dating scene, the things that she learned studying abroad in Jerusalem, and then eventually connecting with Gerald and her meeting and their marriage in the San Diego temple. So that's a really brief overview, but if you want to know more about their story, their upbringing, what led them to this point that we're going to start getting into, please go back and watch part 1 and part 2. But in this part 3, we are jumping into where they started to get a little bit more nuanced in their faith. And will you guys bring us back up to kind of where was your mind at right about this point? You were talking about like if you were going to start having kids, the things that you'd want to be able to teach them, the environment you'd want to be raising them in. So go ahead and bring us up to where we're at right now in this part 3 with your testimonies and your belief in the church.
Perfect. Yeah. So most of our nuance was developed around how we wanted to be the most effective parents should we decide to be parents.
Yeah.
And actually that was a whole big struggle for us, even deciding if we wanted to have kids. And that was controversial in of itself, especially with my family who are so traditional. And my role as a Mormon woman has always been expected to be a mother and to have children. And so explaining to my mom that maybe I didn't want to have kids was it was disregarded. And it was like, of course you'll have kids. That's what you do and you'll be great at it. And that's what we do as Mormons. And that's the plan of salvation is to get married and have a kid. So, have a few kids, never just one. So even my concerns about raising kids and the desire to have them was disregarded despite, how difficult it is to be a parent and to raise kids and the reality of that. And, me growing up and knowing a good portion of how difficult it was, watching my mom and being the oldest of 5 and participating and helping raise children and babysit them and be a good example and all the stresses that come with that. So, it's funny that we are and were so concerned with how we would be good parents when we didn't even know if we wanted to be parents. But that Mormon upbringing was so integral to my identity that it still led me to developing more nuance and to learning more about the psychology of and human development of children and adulthood and that and going to therapy and learning what healthy relationships look like and seeing how the church did not teach those healthy relationships, did not teach boundaries, did not teach inner knowing, did not teach valuing your autonomy and knowing that if I should have kids one day, I wanted to teach them all those things and how it didn't align with what the church had taught me. So,
yeah. And I think the other thing that initiated that conversation was, so for me, after I got converted, I got a calling to teach in primary. That was the first calling I had. And then me and Makenzie were also teaching in primary. And then there are certain things that we learned from our kids that were kind of problematic. And I started feeling like I don't want to bring up my kids this way. Like I don't want, like at one point I had a kid who was telling me how he cannot play with his neighbor at home, but they go to the same school. They are like the neighbors were not members or something. And I remember telling Makenzie that, like, how do you feel about this? Because to me, it's weird that this little kid who is like almost 7, he can pick up on that. Like, yeah, I mean, we have to do it, But it's also weird because we go to the same school, you know, and I think that's where like part of why our conversation started like going towards kids is like, yeah, I mean, we are observing these little things that kind of, you know, they are not going to translate into good adults, you know, like it doesn't, if you're already living in an environment or if you're already being taught like you cannot hang out with people because they don't go to the same church as you or they don't have the same beliefs as you, it's not something, it's not an environment if we want to bring up our kids in. So I mean, just to add to what Makenzie said, it's probably something that we also had kind of, I mean, come across, and it kind of was bothering to us that it's a normal way of to other people bringing up kids, just like teaching them these unchrist-like things in a church that, you know, is supposed to be the Church of Jesus Christ. So that was bothering.
So what kind of Jesus, because everybody has their own spiritual experiences that tie them to their maker, that tie them to the best, most important parts of the gospel. Then you can kind of discount like the more cultural things or the problems that, you know, some dumb leader said this and this, or some kid said this about who they wouldn't play it or play with it, you know, in their schoolyard or whatever. Mm-hmm. What were your impressions of the type of God that you looked up to, that you worshiped within Mormonism, and how did that change your relationship with the church?
Yeah, that's a really great question. For me, it started with something as simple as like getting a nose piercing. Like I was an active member. We were teaching in primary at that time. And that was something I'd wanted for a long time, like back in high school. Someone was like, you have a cute nose. You should get a piercing. And I had been teased for my nose growing up. I had been called Miss Piggy and things like that because of my nose. And so to hear someone like compliment it and tell me that it was like a cute part of me that I should accentuate was meaningful to me. It sounds really simple and really petty, but I love that. But I had never considered it because that's not what God wants or what the prophet had said. And I was so convinced that the prophet truly did speak for God. And so that rule of a single piercing in your ear was from God. And just as an adult in that situation, I took like some time thinking about it and deciding if that was really something that was really important to God. And I was like, you know what? He doesn't care. Really doesn't care. And that was just like such an empowering moment to me. And then it finally pushed me to identifying my own inner knowing and really redefining my relationship with God and who I thought they were. And I just kind of like reevaluated all these other small things, like not watching rated R movies and, I don't know, like the strictness with the garments and things like that and the wording of the temple. And I just kind of thought back to like all of these things that prophets had been revealing or the rules that we had lived by. And I just was so overcomplicated. And I realized that that's not who God was to me. And I realized that if I was to one day become a God, like that, and that's what we teach in the church, is that the righteous people can one day become their own God. It's like, well, if I'm going to be like God one day, I'm not answering to another God. Like I am that person, right? And I will have to reason for myself and think for myself. And so it really, it strengthened my testimony of the church for a while and of God. Like that improved my relationship with God so much because I was like, I'm doing what he wanted me to do. Like I'm becoming like him and I'm learning how to make my own decisions as an adult and to reason for myself and find my own truth. And so some people could see that like that physical nose piercing is like a sin and that I'm disregarding. But honestly, for me, it was such a testimony builder because I thought I was being more righteous by ignoring the small petty things that really didn't matter and focusing on how I treated people and if I was being honest, if I was serving, if I was being charitable, the things that I felt like God really did care about. So for me, that was the catalyst of like completely reevaluating my relationship with God.
Something as simple as a nose ring.
As
Like
simple
for me,
as
it was
that.
like a cup of coffee, like reevaluating what really matters in life. But a lot of people will hear that and they'll hear somebody who was breaking the Mormon rules, and then it just led to a slippery slope of thinking that you know better than God and that you were out of the bounds. But it sounds like a lot of study and contemplation and prayer went into that decision. Or what gave you the confidence to even get the nose ring or to start down this path of your own like self-actualization?
Yeah. It's funny because I literally did study it. Like I studied what President Hinckley had said about piercings and in the context and what exactly it was. And I just realized like how much energy I was spending on it and just how focusing on that would take me away from things that truly were more beneficial and more consequential. So, I mean, some people could just say like, well, you could have just not gone a nose ring and still focused on the more important things. But for me, it was something that was taking up space in my mind. And I just was curious, like, what does God really care about? So even though someone could argue with me and be like, just blame me for spending too much time on a nose ring, that was the gateway to so many other things that I could sit and questioned and studied. And the church teaches that I can have personal revelation. And so I was just developing my own skill for that. And that's more important than anything else. So, yeah, I mean, people will argue with me until whatever, and they can feel however they want to feel. But for me, it was developing that strength of personal revelation and developing my own inner knowing. And that translates to a lot of other things that are much more important than a nose ring. But it was brought about by the decision to get a nose ring. So
yeah, that's
worth
incredible. I really do. I like how you said the word gateway. Like we think of like gateway drugs, but it's like gateway coffee and gateway nose rings, So Gerald, as Makenzie is going through this, where kind of was your testimony? Did you have similar feelings like you needed to process things differently, or were you guys on the same page, or did you have catching up to do? Where were you at?
As far as by here going through the piercing thing, I remember she asked me about it and how I felt about it, and I just said, to me, it's not important how someone looks. And just like yesterday, I guess I was even telling, I was like, you know what? This reminds me about what Jesus said to the Pharisees when he was like, oh, you only care about the outside of the cup and not the inside. So you will clean the outside of the cup, but you don't care about the inside, which is very true, because seeing someone who has tattoos or nose piercing does not actually say anything about that person as a person. You're just like judging them because of the outward look, which is a very shallow thing to do. So I remember her bringing that and asking me. I did not realize how big of a decision it was at that moment until she sort of was like going through that decision making process, but vocalizing it to me, like, so I don't know how people are gonna feel, and this is how piercings have been, how this is how people have felt about piercings in the church. And it just felt weird to me, and I just told her, I was like, hey, whatever decision you make, like, I will support you as long as it makes you happy. That's what is important, because it's not you're adding a certain character to your personality that you did not have before. It's just a nose ring. It's not something like big. But at that moment, I am also, alongside here, I am struggling with how people in the church were treating non-members, because in my head, the type of, I would say the Jesus Christ that I believed, I was expecting to see in the church. He loved everybody, right? And he did not isolate himself from other people. He was never like, yeah, I have the truth, so I'm just going to hang around other people who have the truth, which was like a selfish thing for me to hear people say that, like, oh yeah, we only like hang out with Mormons only. Even the idea of Mormons coming to Utah because Utah is where other Mormons are, it makes life easier for them. It kind of goes against the idea that we have the truth, because the only reason why Heavenly Father will give you the truth is for you to share it, right? Mm-hmm. with other people who do not know the truth. So if you are if you are like surrounding yourself with other people who know the truth, aren't you working against your Heavenly Father's goal of spreading the word? Because you're not spreading the word, you're surrounding yourself with people who already know the word. You don't want to interact with other people who do not know the word. So how are they going to know the word, right? Because you are not interacting with them, you're not talking to them or something like that. So that was my first struggle I had, is why don't we talk to other people with a different, like, why don't we encourage that? Not just the mission itself, but after the mission, what happens? That's what I was sort of expecting to see. Maybe people are more like into interacting with non-members and non-believers, but it wasn't the case. Hence me being really disturbed by a child sharing an experience where they're like, yeah, I'm not allowed to play with so and so. And I'm asked why they don't go to church. Okay. And even Makenzie telling me that, yeah, sometimes people feel like if you interact with people who are not non-Mormons, you leave the church. And I was like, so if interacting with someone who doesn't have the truth will invalidate your truth, do you have the truth? It kind of like seems like it's the other way around. So that was the other thing that I was struggling with. And then the third thing, I don't know if third or second, I can't remember, was how church members responded to social injustice, like, stories. And I think for us,
Well, that's a whole can of worms.
yeah.
Can we go in there?
I guess.
Can I talk about my nose ring one more time?
Yeah.
I just forgot, like, that was important for me too, because the church that we were a part of already respected us so much. Like, we had given talks and they were like, that's so great, we want to hear from them again. And we were teaching their 7-year-olds and they loved us in primary. And so we were respected, right? And I just thought, like, at the end of the day, wouldn't it be great for these kids to learn how to not judge someone they already like, and their parents to not judge us? Like, are you really going to say that me getting a nose piercing invalidates that talk that I just gave, or the testimony, or the lessons that we share with your kids every week that you respect and enjoy? And for me, I thought if they could learn to not judge me, then maybe they could learn to not judge other people that were being judged more harshly. Like, if you could accept me, then that's a stepping stone to not judging non-members, to not judging members of the LGBTQ community. I just, like, again, that is something so simple, but it just, like, offering learning opportunities for members to kind of just, like, accept nuance and difference and not be so judgmental.
Yeah.
But I liked your point. I know, like, a big struggle for you that you noticed was people not sharing, and also just like that the prophet wasn't going into foreign lands to preach the word like they did in the Bible.
Yeah, and the idea of him receiving revelation for other people who were not members, and they would admit at the general conference, like, oh, it's not only Mormons who watch this, pretty much everyone around the world watches this. But then the stuff they are sharing is kind of tailored to Mormons only. Like, I did not see that part of him receiving revelation for everybody else who was non-Mormon. And I did not like...
Or not even in America. Like,
yeah.
They kept talking about American issues or American government.
And
you're like,
values that are only exist here. And
this was a worldwide message.
Exactly. So I had a problem with that. I'm like, you're portraying yourself as this person who represents everybody, yet that's not exactly what you're doing. Your talks are specifically about issues that are happening here, right? Or issues that are happening in the church. And the other thing that I did not like about that was that certain things were being talked about at the general conference as if they are coming up with these new changes themselves. But then when you trace back, people have been complaining about the exact same things, specifically like, oh, there is not that many women speakers at the general conference. And then the next one, you hear them portraying it as if like they just come up with it on the spot, like it's their thing. And like, no, people did complain about this. Like, don't portray it as if like you received some sort of revelation that we did not know, right? So it felt to me like the church is responding to mobs complaining and then trying to fashion it as if it's a revelation. And I did not like that at all. I was just like, I remember talking to my kids, I was like, this does not feel okay, like to listen to them say things like this. And another social injustice story that I don't know how we got to this topic when we were talking about suicide deaths in Utah or something like that.
Yeah, with generally the LGBTQ
Yeah,
community.
exactly. And the response that we got that next general conference after we were talking about that, I did not like it. I think we were taking a vacation or something, and I was watching it on my phone. I don't know who it was.
So righteous. You're watching General Conference on your phone on vacation?
I was in the back of the car. We had your friend who was driving, so I was just sitting there.
It's her fault.
Yeah, and then I don't know. I can't remember. I think it was Elder Oaks. I don't know who it was. Who kind of like responded to it like from kind of like a political point of view, and I was just like, why would you say that on this platform, right? Which is really funny because after I remember telling you and Casey about that, I was like, did you hear what this guy said? Funny thing is, like later on, the response from the church was like, oh yeah, they are also men. They have their own views. They have their own political views or whatever, trying to distance themselves from his talk. And I was like, but you also let him share that on your platform though. So you cannot try to
and
be
gave
like,
him the calling and authority to do that and said that they'll never lead you astray. So which one is it?
Yeah. So rather than you addressing the problem that he is bringing these ideologies, because if you are saying everyone is listening to you on general conference and they are listening for revelation and you know what I mean, things that you are receiving for us from Heavenly Father, and this is what we hear, why would you let that kind of like, tarnish your message or kind of distort what we were talking about? Because anyway, everybody else who was around the world did not really understand what that was about, right? Like it's something that was specific. He was responding specifically to something that was happening here, and people complaining about how those death rate is increasing. And here he is saying like, oh yeah, we are still just gonna stick to our guns. We're not gonna budge to you guys complaining about it. And how is that not something the church is agreeing with? So
How is that something that God or Jesus would teach?
Yeah.
That's exactly opposite of what Jesus teaches. And I just think like the more and more we listened and learned and experienced the church, the more it was so opposite of the Jesus that had been taught in the Bible. Like his very words, his very nature was standing up for the poor and the needy and the outcast and sitting with the sinners and not judging them and being charitable. Like he came down and he called out the church members essentially and was like, no, you're the ones that are being self-righteous and you're not doing what you preach. And so we already had that frustration and that discord between, like I felt like the Mormon church was following a different Jesus, and their Jesus was the Republican Party. Their Jesus was obsessed with capitalism and would profess love but not actually save children's lives. And didn't accept the LGBTQ community. And, what else? How can we? It just was so opposite of any evidence of Jesus or anything that Jesus actually was. And it was so...
It wasn't Christ-like in the sense that the idea of someone disowning their child because of what they love was just so disturbing. I couldn't grasp that concept because I remember asking Makenzie, I was like, if our child comes out as gay, like what are you gonna do? Like what are we gonna do about it, right? And I do not understand how you can reach a point where you say, I'm going to deassociate I'm going to distance myself from my own child because they are not conforming to this doctrine or whatever it is that really does not say anything about them as a person. And I could not really like understand how that's Christ-like. And then Makenzie, I think you shared a video of I can't remember his name. He was on Ellen, and he's ex-Mormon, and he was talking about that too, how it happened to him. Like, yeah, this is real. You have those thoughts because imagine being brought up in this community that everyone like is kind of accepted based on these like marriages that we have agreed, and all of a sudden your own family does not want you because of that one single thing that you just come out as gay. And it's like, yeah, I did have suicide thoughts. I experienced that. And it was just like heartbreaking to see people literally like bashing him and be like, that's not true. That's not how it happens. And I'm like, how do you know? Like, how is that Christ like telling someone's like, no, your experience, let me explain it to you how your experience happened. Don't say that because you are trying to give the church a bad name. So that, I guess, like that was like a cascade of events also leading to George Floyd or something.
I think that like our view of the church and our position in the church was no longer like, how are we benefiting from the church, but how can we just create a better environment for people that we loved and supported that were outcast and being taught misogynistic, sexist, anti-LGBTQ things.
While still being like a literal believers in the church still, right? Like,
yeah,
maybe a little bit more nuanced about.
Yeah, like we disagreed with like the policy requiring like children of gay parents to
the
disown their
2015 policy.
parents. Yeah. So we disagreed with that. Disagreed with the gender roles. Didn't think that was inspired. Like, we definitely acknowledge that like prophets are making real mistakes and are not actually leading the church like as God would.
Yeah, it's like their own. I mean, I don't know if I could call it like they are imposing their own opinions on us, but the fact that they are in that position, we would take it as, oh, maybe it's revelation, maybe it's a good doctrine when it's not. And also the idea that they would not own up to their mistakes.
Yeah.
A mistake is a mistake when you own up to it. You're like, hey, we admit like this was bad, right? So we are changing stuff from going here onwards.
Yeah.
But pretending like, oh, well, it's somebody else's fault. Like,
It's God's fault specifically.
Yeah.
God, like, they've never done anything wrong. It's only
Someone's
God.
got to get thrown under the bus, and it's usually God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we still were attending church, but it was more like, how can we make this a better environment for children growing up and hopefully elicit change? But at some point, I mean, we just realized that it wasn't, if it was the true church, then it would be moving faster. It would be leading the changes instead of like dragging behind after members had begged and pleaded and protested against it. But I mean, I guess we didn't really, not enough to leave.
Yeah, at that point, we still did not leave. We were still hoping, okay, maybe if they
Maybe they'll catch up.
If they are
if there are enough
catching
of
up
us in the church.
Yeah, maybe we were going to get to a point where they will finally like are caught up, and then now they are thinking of changes that will actually make our church feel like, oh, this is like a Christ-like environment where everybody is welcome. You're not going to be profiled. You're not going to, everyone is just going to treat you like you are equal. So we still had that hope at this point.
And we were prioritizing our own revelation or our own inner knowing above what a prophet said. Like, we weren't taking it for face value anymore.
Yeah.
Which I think if a lot of Mormons did that, it'd be a healthier church. It's the adherence to the orthodoxy that, creates a lot of dogmatic authoritarian systems that I know people within the church with their political values, they say they don't like, but within the church, they really hold on to the orthodoxy of, two genders, man, like Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, just all these really hard line ideas about sexuality and various other ideas. But when you, add more progressive values into it, it's just a matter of time before you find yourself trying to figure out how you're supposed to be in one world and the other at the same time.
Yeah.
So is that kind of your experience?
Yeah, exactly. At that point, prophets were like well-intentioned people, but not necessarily being led by God or by Jesus. And there was a huge disconnect there so we were kind of like coasting along, trying to figure out exactly where we would land in the church when May 2020 rolled around.
Yeah.
And for me, so after George Floyd was murdered, I saw so much blatant racism and victim blaming from people in my home ward, people that knew my mom as a Black woman and loved her and were friends with her. They knew me. Some of them had been in the temple with me, knew my husband. People that I really loved and respected like my whole life, just publicly posting like the most horrendous things,
like blatantly racist things against like Black Americans.
If only George Floyd had come from a better family, with better family values, then he wouldn't have been a criminal and been in this situation to have been murdered. Like, sure, it's really sad, but what could he have done to have prevented that? And if only he had the family values that the church prescribes, and people just need Jesus, and that solves everything. And it was horrendous. I mean, just putting themselves up and thinking that if only he was Mormon or had Mormon values, that would have prevented someone from murdering him. And it's just ironic because that same person who had posted that had some serious problems in their own marriage. And I mean, like their own spouse breaking the law and endangering other people's lives. And so it was so ironic to be like touting your family life that's so much better when it was a hypocritical situation. And I just was so angry. And I was like engaging with these people online and people in the church, friends, like family members that just had no empathy and were blaming, just victim blaming. And it was just horrible, or blaming Black culture for creating this person that would break the law and that they kind of deserved it. And I knew in that moment, well, and even a response from another member was, the world just needs Jesus. And like, that was their solution. And I'm like, but you realize that Jesus would 100% be on the side of the minorities, of the oppressed, of the victims, and would not be sitting here judging someone and bashing someone who was dead. And it's just like, that just solidified that like the Jesus that I worshiped was not at all the Jesus that the church praised. And I said that to this person. I just was like, I'm sorry, didn't Jesus come to like overthrow the tyrannical government? I mean, to talk about how unfair it was being, and to call out the members and to defend those that needed help. And she was like, no, Jesus came to die for us. And I'm like, yeah, but what did he do for the 34 years before that? I mean, it was constantly teaching and calling out people and supporting women and supporting sinners and everything. So it just, I was so angry engaging with these people, and I was angry that I was angry because I knew I was right, and I knew I had the charitable view and the loving view and the view that was taught of Jesus in the Bible, and yet people were utilizing Jesus to say that that was justified. And I just knew that, like, I knew in that moment I would never raise Black children in the church. And that was like, that gave me permission for myself to like then look into the CES letter and to look into all the truth claims of the church. And
before we get into that, can I ask one quick question?
Yeah.
Because I hear people maybe that are believers listening, and I used to believe that too. You know, people go on mission trips, people do all kinds of things because they don't need to actually know the root cause of the problems that people are facing. They just need the gospel. They need Jesus. So in your own words, why doesn't somebody who had, faced the police brutality that George Floyd did, or various other people who have been victims of different systems in America. So let's take George Floyd, for instance. Why, in your words, does him not being Mormon and everyone not being Mormon make the world okay again? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, Jesus is not here. Jesus could not save him. And Jesus, in that view, operates through people, right? So you saying, oh, he just needed Jesus is so oversimplified and so beside the point. Because what he needed was people that did not profile him, that did not blame him or shoot and ask and then ask questions, right? And he's not the first one that this has happened to. There's been a long, long history of racism and profiling and unfair brutality, and much of that has been justified through Christianity. I mean, slavery was a Christian concept, and so it's so silly to me that someone can just think that the idea of Jesus can just solve that when humans, imperfect, and also just straight up evil humans have been using Jesus to justify terrible things in the world. So that's, I don't know. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. Just where my mind goes to the same things and reasons too, that Jesus would have to work through people, and people exist in systems that are faced with various ways that people can have the higher ups and the lower downs, that can be just a hotbed for problems and oppression. And it's unless we actually say, what would Jesus want us, what kind of work would he want us to get done within this system? Or else we're never going to have anything to come to fruition. And it's usually people who are agitators, in my opinion, people like MormonStories podcast, or, I just want to say, just put that out there. Just people who...
Casual shout out.
Yeah, just like a shout out to this whole organization we got going on here. Just people coming on and telling their stories of ways that they were oppressed, whether it was a, sexual abuse cover up or anything, where we're saying, all right, I know Jesus wouldn't like this, so how can we get to work to better this system that is supposed to be serving people?
And still, if you're saying, oh, that man needs Jesus, or the world needs Jesus to avoid this, that means that you yourself are not willing to do the work. Or like waiting for the second coming. And that was essentially her point, was just like, oh man, we just need the second coming to come. I'm like, no, we need to be better now. We can't be waiting for this imaginary time that you yourself don't know when is going to happen.
Yeah, but also like how entitled are you to think that, hey, if the second coming happened right now, I will be on the right side with Jesus and we'll be fixing all your...
You actually don't want him to come back. I don't think he'd be very happy with you.
You have a temple recommend in your wallet. That's how you know you're good. It's true. Did you guys do that? You're like, no matter what, I'm fine.
Sweet angels. It's just...
Yeah.
And just the fact that person can wait for that, right? Like, oh, we'll just keep waiting for the second coming because that's the only thing that can solve it. And it's like, actually, no. People standing up for what is right is what the world needs right now. We can't, and you might be able to sit there in your home as a white person with privilege and just be like, yeah, I'm just happy to wait until Jesus comes while other people are dying in the streets. And it's just very, very selfish and very unfair and very oversimplified.
And for me to see church members arguing that, I just realized how detached from reality most people are. There are certain things that are not like Jesus' problems, right? Like we are agreeing to certain laws that are disadvantaging other peoples, we can change that. Like, we don't need Jesus for that. We can just change that. Like, hey, let's not have this law because it's disadvantaging other people. But so the response of everyone running to be like, you need Jesus, you need to pray about it. It's just like, well, I'm comfortable where I am. Maybe pray about it. Your situation is going to change. But you are talking to the exact same person. You can change their situation by just be like, hey, can we agree that this law is not okay? Can we agree that the rules and regulations we have in place right now is profiling minorities? Like, Jesus does not need to come down and tell us that. He even in his first the first time he was here, people tried to make him answer political questions, like that happened. So we know how that's gonna go. If he was here and you are asking him about that, we know how it's gonna go already, because we have asked him about text questions, right? And his response was like, hey, you guys, you can fix this. Like, deal with Caesar. You know what I mean? Talk to him.
Yeah.
He's the guy. Talk to him about taxes. You can change, because it's a law. We agree, like, as people. He did not like come down and be like, oh yeah, taxes are going to be 20%. No, that's not him. It's us who agree about those things, right? So to see people responding to things like that with putting him in that place and be like, oh, hey, there's nothing we can do. Our hands are tied, when they are not, right?
Right.
You can just like advocate for people to be nicer to each other, for people to be good to each other, and let's not enforce laws we know that they are not Christ-like, right? So that's the only like little thing I wanted to see in people, just be like, well, this is horrible. We have seen this several times, and every time it happens, there's a group of people that are crying. There's a group of people that are in pain. As a Christian, I am bothered seeing other people in pain, seeing other people struggling, right? With certain things I can change. The same way they say, oh yeah, it's not when judgment day comes, when you saw a hungry person by the side of the street, that's what Jesus is gonna ask you. You saw me hungry and you didn't feed me. That's the exact same thing, right? You saw me getting profiled and you decide to look away and you said, oh yeah, Jesus is gonna come.
Right.
But so that was like really ironic to me, that like these are the same people who will tell you that when it comes to problems they care about, right? They will tell you like, oh yeah, we want to solve world hunger, donate to this whatever food bank or whatever, and then they'll publish and they will try to make you feel bad if you don't participate in that specific problem, because to them that's what they view as the Christ-like problem, right? And when it comes to another problem that does not affect them, they will be just like, well, pray about it, or let's wait for Jesus to come back, he'll fix it. So that's what bugged me in that situation. Was like, okay, so
There's no compassion or empathy. Like your first response to just
if you cannot empathize,
heartbroken that it happened,
Yeah.
before
Thoughts and
judging
prayers.
why it shouldn't have happened.
exactly, rather than getting to the bottom of the issue and address the problem, that's your response. So me, like being a black person, I was just like, okay, if I find myself in a position where I encounter someone who is racist against me, are you gonna immediately go into my past rather than kind of helping me and be like, let's see what kind of a person Gerald was, despite whatever happened in this situation. Let's see, oh, he said a bad word to his wife, he was not Christ, like, so that's how I felt. Was like, oh, if we have kids and they're gonna grow up around these people, they are in danger, because no one is willing to help them, because already they've shown us that they are kind of biased to people who look like me, because they already anticipate there's problems with you. So if you get profiled, if you die on the street, you probably deserved it. So that was I don't know, that was really difficult for me to deal with, specifically seeing members responding like that. Other people, I pretty much did not really care what they said, because I knew that certain people are responding from a political point of view, or they feel like, it's going to cause unrest. And some of them, they have members who work in the law enforcement. I did not, I also feel like, yeah, this situation is creating danger for everybody, right? I don't want people to go after good cops. I don't want people to feel like, yeah, this is what every cop is like. But I wanted people to recognize that the system itself is not perfect, right? So at least let's admit that, right? And specifically from people who claim to be Christ-like, a little bit of empathy would be okay in a situation like that. Which and
You
I
don't
did
need to
not.
agree with someone
Yeah.
to just acknowledge their pain.
Yeah, and we did not get that. So I started questioning a lot of how much of what we are doing is actually Christ-like, and how much of it is just our opinion, our environment, in our political bias in most cases.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And that's like a really, I think, invaluable perspective for our audience that we don't usually get people talking about, summer 2020 and all of the crap show that went down. So thank you guys for your perspective on that. And I think you're right on a lot of those things. But it just kind of made me think too, Makenzie, you said earlier that, like slavery was a Christian idea. And all I'll say to that is I think it's like, kind of a universal idea with a lot of, and you can justify it in the Christian Bible, but then also when it was abolished, people could abolish it by justifying it with the cherry-picked versions of the good kind of Christ, right?
Right.
And I think that sentiment also plays out in Mormonism, that you can find the most beautiful parts of Mormonism about your personal revelation, your divinity, your ability to be God, to find the best parts of Christ that you connect with that make you a better person. But if you're not in a community where other people value that same thing, you're going to be, rowing upstream forever. And you don't want to do that to your kids, that you're going to be, raising a potential family in a church system that you might have been able to, it sounds like, garnish some good things out of, but you don't know what environment that's going to be like for your kids.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you guys are saying to that point?
And what had planted that idea before too had just been, one of my coworkers, he's Hispanic and his wife is Black, and he's a member. And he had told me, we raised our kids here in Utah, and my wife has never seen more racism than here in Utah, and just the way that they were,
That's heartbreaking.
kids were treated. Yeah. And I have other friends that are mixed race as well, that have they were not allowed to date white people, and had been called the N-word by people in their own ward. And I mean, and especially that coworker, like they were from the South, they've experienced racism, and to say that it was worse here in Utah, it just really opened my eyes to the reality of it, and delving into the history. It was like, yeah, you are not admitting that the priesthood ban was racist, and it was, and the more I read about it, the more I realized like that they had specifically advocated against civil rights. They did not support the civil rights movement, and had said that, if we give civil rights to them, then they're going to then Black people will mix with white people, and we can't have that. And so for apologists now to be saying, oh, well, we don't understand the priesthood ban, and it didn't sound right, but God did it, and we don't know why. That's not true. We know exactly why they did it. And we had the Mormon doctrine by Bruce R. McConkie saying that Black people in the pre-existence were less valiant, and that they had the curse of Cain. And so it would be one thing if the church was accountable to that and admitted that was racist, that was wrong, we apologize, we don't feel that way, that was not of God. That would cause more consideration, and be like, okay, you're owning up to it, you're admitting, and we can move forward. But they don't. And they've specifically said, we do not make apologies. And the complete hypocrisy of that, when you are demanding that I make changes every week, that I repent, that I make amends. And part of repentance is owning up and apologizing to people you've harmed. But the church itself doesn't do that. Christ's church, the most perfect church in the world, that was just bullshit to me. Like, I was like, how can you tell me you won't repent, but you're expecting me to? And it's embarrassing for me that it took that long for me to see it. But it is what it is, and I can't change it. And it broke my heart, because I had given so much of my life to the church, and the security that you feel, feeling like you do have the truth. And I knew that decision to leave would change my relationships with my family forever. And I love my parents. I had a great relationship with them, and it's never going to be the same. I hope one day, maybe, but it changed my worldview. It changed like the security that I thought I had, how I thought I was going to raise my kids. Yeah. So
Was there something that you, like, it sounds like you had license that you felt like things are not feeling right to raise your kids in, and you needed to like address more of the truth claims head on? Was there a night that you like read a book or did some Googling or some searching, or did it come slower than that?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, like I've been a pretty decisive person. So, I mean, immediately, pretty much after having like a few days of these conversations with these ward members that I knew and loved, it was pretty immediate. Like I remember telling Gerald, like, I'm out. Like I'm not going to stay here. There's nothing I can do to improve these people's mindset, which was heartbreaking. But I mean, more than that, it wasn't I can't change them. It was, I'm not going to put my kids in that situation. I'm not going to put Black kids into a church that it is normal for them to not empathize with them and to victim blame or not acknowledge its history. And I just kind of thought like, well, of course you're not going to side with them or empathize with them. You haven't addressed your own racist past. And so, I mean, it just made sense in that moment that was never going to change, and that I couldn't take that gamble that we would be in a more nuanced ward that would be supportive to the plight of Black people in America. That
must have been so heartbreaking on like 5 different levels times a couple, like falling out of love and relationship with the church and the ward members that I'm sure you loved. And just, I think we all had to grow up that through COVID, through everything.
Right.
And we saw the world with a different lens for the first time. Some of us, others of us, not so much, but sounds like you had like a real intense awakening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, most people would assume that I only care about Black people because I married a Black man. And that's so disingenuous to who also I am and my own like ancestry and my own mom. And that's something I've been fighting for, to like prove that this started, that my identity and my care for other people and for Black culture and Black people started before I met him. And it's just really offensive to me. But I know that that's what they think. And I know that they think that it's because of him, or it's his fault that I left the church because he's a convert and he's progressive and, came from another country. And it's just so funny, like learning about his story and how conservative his family was and his culture.
Right.
And, I was the one that said, I'm leaving. Like, I'm not going to do this.
You left first, and there's a time when I did not know what am I going to do. But partly because I was disappointed in the church, because I felt like, well, finally I found this safe place, right? And then it turned out not to be safe, and I didn't want to go back again into that place I was just before I got baptized, where nothing around me was not making any sense. I felt lost. So just like watching Mackenzie's like journey, I was heartbroken for real. I was like, this, I don't know how am I going to recover from this, and which is really funny that people would think like, oh yeah, these were my ideas. Yet like because they were never open to having these conversations. If they had talked to her, they could have already picked it up that pretty much the majority of it that's like how she had felt for a while. But because the environment in the church does not provide a safe space for her to even talk like to her parents about it, so it just left them with the person they knew who went to a mission, who went to BYU, but they have never actually like took interest into, okay, like what kind of a person she is, like what kind of things that she believes in and things like that. So hence them like coming, I was kind of heartbroken when she tried to talk about it the other time, and the response was like, "Whoa, you have changed," and I was just like, I don't feel like she has changed, but you just did not take time, like to know her or like to have those conversations with her. Otherwise, you would have known before she married me that she already kind of was on a path where she was kind of seeking a safe space for herself, not because she married me or anything like that. So that's something that I just want them to know that, well, she left first. I stuck around for a little bit, and I was hoping like, oh, maybe some big change will happen and we'll both be like, okay, now, maybe we are heading the right way. Maybe we can stay. Maybe things are going to change, but it didn't happen for us. And I ended up just giving up too, because I did not see the same people like taking that giant 360.
Well, I think what helped was after I came to that conclusion, like I did finally give myself permission to get into the CES letter. Okay. And then I was like, well, of course, why would I even try to sit here and justify it or work my way around it when the church has been completely dishonest about polygamy in the past and Joseph having multiple wives and lying to Emma about it and having underage girls.
Is that all things that you first like discovered in the CS letter?
Yeah, I had never.
How did you hear about the CS letter? Like, where did you first find it?
How did I find it? I think actually it was the Gift of a Mormon Faith podcast. Like, I think that might be the first time I heard about the CES letter. Because I knew
the retreat. Oh, okay, so you started listening to that because you're going through a faith
the old
crisis.
one with John and Margie and Natasha Helfer. Because I knew I couldn't stay in the church. I knew I wasn't going to raise children in the church, and that was just this heartbreaking. Trying to figure out where I'm going to land, and then they started discussing like truth claims and the CES letter specifically. So I think that's how I even discovered it. And I just, like, the internalized sexism and misogyny in me was like my own feelings and how I've been treated and how I've interacted with these people isn't valid enough for me to leave the church. Like, I didn't feel like anyone would think that was valid enough. But if I can say, well, look at all these truth claims, then that could be a valid reason for it. Or I thought maybe if I say that I'm doing it for my kids, which I mean, that was the initial reason, right? Was just knowing that I wouldn't raise kids in the church. Like even my position as a mother, like would be more valuable than my own feelings, and that's so disappointing. And that just proves the culture of the church and how problematic it was. And even that my decision to leave couldn't just be based on what I felt and what I read, that, oh, no, you had to have been led away by your convert Black husband. Like, there's no way that you could have come to that conclusion. I'm like, I've always been praised like my whole life for being smart and for being the golden child and doing all the things right and studying and having all the right answers. And so you're telling me now that after 27 years of life that suddenly all of that's gone and I can no longer reason for myself and I can't make a decision for myself and there's nothing I can do but follow my husband out of the church, which is what I've been taught to do anyway, is to follow my husband. So if that was the case, it's still Mormonism's fault that I left the church following my husband, because I was never taught to have my own authority or my own revelation. So it's just ironic because no matter which way you slice it, it would still be Mormonism's fault, right? Or the culture of the church that I was raised in to submit to my husband. So
Yeah, and they confirmed that when we moved too, because they started calling us right after she submitted. Wait, when was it when they started calling us?
the missionaries when we moved to Atlanta.
Yeah.
So we had already decided to move to Atlanta by that point.
Yeah.
Just to have a better community for our kids to grow up in, with successful, educated Black people.
Yeah.
That they could look up to and have more of a community with. So, I mean, we had been planning that for a year. I knew that I was going to put in a year at my job after I graduated, and then we were going to move to Atlanta. And then this happened, which just further validated that we no longer wanted to be in Utah.
Yeah.
And
I was gonna bring up.
do we have the missionaries reaching out to us in Atlanta?
Yeah, in sort of invalidating your response and calling me.
They had been calling both of us nonstop.
Yeah.
The missionaries, and we had
Never
never.
since you were going inactive.
Yeah, like they knew that we had never gone to church.
We're never going to church
in
ever since
Atlanta.
we moved there.
Okay.
And so I responded to them and said, "Hey, we're taking a break from the church. If we decide that we want to come back, we will reach out. But I'd appreciate you waiting until we reach out." And they're like, "Okay, we just want to know if there's anything that we can do for you." We're like, "Oh, thanks. Like, appreciate it. I'll let you know. Like, we'll be the ones to reach out." And they're like, "Sure." They called him the next day, and the next day, and the next day. Like, they no longer reached out to me, but every time he told me that they called, I was so pissed off because I'm like, I had this conversation with them. I told them that this was their decision. Like, and it was, I'm lucky that I haven't had that many like horribly sexist experiences in the church. And I know many women have, but it just felt like you don't give a shit what I say.
Yeah.
And like that I can't be in charge of my own life or my family. Like that you think that I'm lying or not representing it, or it doesn't matter because I don't have the priesthood. So my opinion doesn't matter. And it's just, and I know they're 19-year-old boys, but again, like that's the culture of the church that has encouraged them to continue to break people's boundaries and disregard what a woman says.
Yeah.
And for a 19-year-old boy or an 18-year-old boy to not know what it means to say no, like when a woman says no, and for you to ignore that, that is so dangerous. And just, it makes me angry on so many levels because that can be a horrible situation.
Yeah. I mean, what bugged me most about that was when we moved to Atlanta initially, right, nobody reached out at all, like nobody for like a month or something. And then all of a sudden, when they called me first, and I was like, I'm not home, because they called as if
They didn't even call me. They just called
Yeah.
you. And
So
we're
they-
trying to get you to do callings and participate.
Yeah.
And stuff.
And I was like, I'm not home. And then the next time they call, I was like, can we stop by your house? We are close by. And I was like, I'm not home, but my wife is home. If you want to stop by, you can see her. And then they did not do anything. Then after she spoke to them that, hey, we're taking a break, the calls were nonstop. And what pissed me off was that one day when we were driving together, and then they called her, and I think they texted you, and she was like, oh yeah, just like we said, we are taking a break. And then she hangs out. 5 minutes later, they call me, and they're like, hey, Brother Benzi, when you're gonna be home? We're just thinking of stopping by. And I was just like, you talked to my wife 5 minutes ago. Like, it's not even a different day, same day. And then I was like, yeah, we're not home. I kind of like just dismissed them. And then since then, they will be calling me every time. Like, are you home? Are you home? Are you home? And when she respond, they wouldn't like take that as an answer. They would immediately like call me again. And I was like, that's starting to really like piss me off now, that like they are acting as if we are in two different parts of the world and we are not talking. Like as if she won't tell me, like she just talked to them, as if I don't tell her that they just called me. So that was like really weird, and it just like confirmed how you felt about that. And I was just like, yeah, this feels like the final straw for me. It's just like, okay, like give us space. You know, if we're trying to figure out something that, of course, we didn't get it all these years that we were with you. So at this moment, the only like respectful thing you could do is just listen. when someone says, hey, I will call you when I need you, right? Just listen to that. Don't call them the next day as if they will sleep it off, and then they'll wake up the next day and they're like, oh yeah, now you're welcome now. So the last time that they called, Makenzie was not there, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna tell them, yeah, you're welcome to come. Like
You
can
set an appointment with them for like the next day.
Yeah, I was like, well, show up tomorrow, I will be home. And they never did.
Well, and the point is you weren't going to be...
They never did.
Yeah.
You weren't going to be like mean to them or anything. It's just like, hey, respect our boundaries.
Yeah. I was like, okay, here's what you want, right?
Like man to man.
Yeah, so show up, then I will say that, right? But then you just like never did. So that was something I did not feel like, okay, it feels like you care when you realize you are losing someone, but when we were there, nobody was like, oh, hey, this new couple is just like stop by or anything, until you got an answer that we are not going to show up at all. And then all of a sudden
then
it's
the
like,
love bombing starts.
Yeah, it's like, oh, Brother Benzi, this family is moving in your area. Do you mind coming and helping us? And I was just like, you don't even know what I look like at this, because you have never showed up to our address, which you have because you have our phone numbers and everything. They never showed up, and they're just like so casual about it. Can we stop by? We have a barbecue. That was the last thing they said, right? It's like, oh, we have a barbecue on Sunday, and we're just wondering, like, if you want to join us, like, you don't have to bring anything or something like that. And this barbecue was at church or something. That's when I was like, well, I'm not going to be home that Sunday, but I will be home later on. I'll be home later on that Sunday. So if you want to come to our home, you can show up at 2 p.m. I'll be home. And that's the last time we heard from them. They never showed up.
And I understand what it's like to be a missionary. And I would have liked the opportunity to like just talk to them or, invite them in or give them some food or whatever. Because I understand how sucky it is to be working so hard. But they didn't want to talk to me after I said no, and that's fine. Anyway.
Yeah, always a good PSA. Be nice to missionaries, but set boundaries and follow through on boundaries. And then, I don't know, call their mission president and complain.
Yeah. Great point.
So while you guys were you both kind of deconstructing the truth claims then at that point? Like going through the CS letter? Like take me through your faith deconstruction after you kind of already stepped away.
Yeah. I just lost any respect for prophets, just like reading the statements that they had made regarding the civil rights movement, regarding I actually finally read like what the 2015 policy regarding children and their parents. And it was like, you need to disown your parents. And what else was it? Move out of their home. And it just was so hypocritical to think that the church was all about families when it was specifically tearing apart families. And then learning that because we always say it was reversed. It wasn't reversed. It was just, they took the blame off of the prophet and said, oh, well, stake presidents and bishops can make this decision. They can decide if they need to disown their family or if they can be baptized. And but then like they weren't accountable to that. It was, oh, we received revelation and we're going to change it. And we're so sorry. No, they don't say sorry, of course.
Yeah.
But it's like they couldn't keep their story straight. First it was God that instituted the ban. And then it was a mistake maybe, or we weren't in consensus, but now God has changed it back. And I had like such a generous and charitable view of prophets beforehand, even when I was not thinking they were perfect. I'm like, but they're still trying their best and they're just maybe confused, but I just realized like how much they did know. And were purposely, Joseph Fielding Smith tearing out like the other account of the first vision out of Joseph Smith's journal and saying that they would never apologize. And the Book of Mormon geography that didn't exist, and that they knew that, and that they knew there was no factual evidence to support the Book of Mormon, and their policy in the 70s of taking Native American children and giving them to white families and saying that they were saving the child and killing the savage. Like, how do you justify that? And it's really sad. And I have to remember that not every member knows that. Very few actually do. And
talking about like the Indian placement program,
right?
And just those various really racist teachings.
Yeah, and just the history of that. But it's deeply offensive to be told that I'm the confused one, that I don't know, when it's like, I actually know more about the church than you do because you haven't looked into the history. And
but you didn't pray enough for it.
But what mattered most at that moment was how they were treating me in the moment, and how they were treating Black people in the moment. And so, but all of the history just gave me validation to my decision and made me feel comfortable in not trying to make it work despite my very real feelings. And that still feels like a betrayal of myself because my feelings should be enough.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't need to look into truth claims to justify my decision to leave. But I did, and I don't regret it. And it just, I wish that I could be strong enough, that I was strong enough in myself to have just left it at that and just say, like, I don't like the sexism in the church. I don't like the racism in the church, and I'm out.
Yeah. And to the point you just said, can you really define what you mean by your feeling should be enough? Because so much of what gets people into Mormonism is my feeling should be enough. So if somebody's feelings are enough, can you define what words do you mean within your feelings? Like, what words come up for you when you think about your frustration or whatever it would be with the church at that time?
Yeah. I just wish that when I say I've left the church and someone asks why, and I say, I don't like how women are treated in the church, or I haven't been treated fairly in the church as a woman, or Black people have not been treated fairly in the church, and I don't like it. It makes me feel uncomfortable. It makes me not enjoy going to church. It prevents me from feeling the Spirit or feeling good, or however you want to call it. That it does not make me a better person. It does not make me a happier person to go to church. That's enough. That me saying I don't want to be in your company is enough for me to not want to go. That I don't need to explain and give a whole soliloquy of why the church isn't true, which they don't respect anyway. Because that's written by anti-Mormons and people that want to destroy the church, and that's not true. That I can just say, I'm not happy to go to church, and I'm happier when I'm not there, and so that's why I don't go to church, and that's enough. That I don't need to justify it. I don't need to hear someone else's explanation of, well, I'm Black in the church and I'm happy, so, or, I'm a woman and I don't feel any problems. That's fine. That's your prerogative. You are more than welcome to go to church because you feel happy and fulfilled there. I don't, and I don't need to explain any further. And there was actually a woman that I met on my mission. She was a less active, so we went and knocked on her door, and she was so generous to say, like, hi, sisters, come on in. And we had known that she had left the church, that she was inactive, and it was the first time that I had been able to sit and discuss with someone their reasonings why. And she's like, I've been praying about it. And there are a lot of things that bother me about the church that I don't agree with. And, I just finally felt like my family would be happier in a different church. And I couldn't argue with that. And I'm like, great. Who am I to say that your feelings are not right? Like, you are a 40-year-old woman, mother, returned missionary herself, and you're telling me that you felt good about being in a different church. And that was valid. And I didn't quite understand it, but I didn't disagree. And it was, like, looking back, one of the first steps to valuing my inner knowing and valuing someone else's. And so I just wish that the people in the church could just say, it's great. I'm glad you felt that way. And I'm glad that you feel better now, and not, you must be confused or you don't know happiness. I do. And everyone is seeking their own happiness. When someone is so concerned for your happiness, it's like, I'm a human. I'm going to seek my own happiness. No one seeks to be miserable. No one is like, what can I do to make my life more complicated or unhappy? Yeah. Like, don't worry about me. I've got me covered. So don't tell me that I'm not happy or that I'm not content with where I'm at, because I'm not seeking to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I don't know.
As somebody who just a few years ago, 3 years ago, probably to be exact, if I would have heard somebody say that when I was Mormon, I would have said, well, the church isn't always supposed to make you happy, or you have been like co-opted by Satan, or like the liberal Democrat Party or something. I would have found another reason, because we're starting with the true church. There's no good reason to leave the true church. You stay no matter what, whether you're gay, whether you're biracial, no matter what it is, because it's true, and God wouldn't make a true church that people would have a good reason to leave. So I can hear kind of the comment section. I just kind of want to give you any kind of space if you want to answer that. You don't have to.
No, I'd love to.
I feel like that comment's going to come up, that people are going to say the same things they probably said to you when you left, that you're finding excuses or whatever that is, that your feelings aren't valid because you had the truth and you gave it up. So what do you have to say?
Sure. And I mean, I agree. I would have been on the same train of thought, that like, I have all the happiness. But looking at the numbers of the members of the church, it is less than 1% of the entire world population that are members of the church. Not even accounting for how many are actively practicing in the church. But to say that we'll be generous and say 1%, only 1% of the world knows happiness. Like, just contemplate that for a moment, and how self-righteous and small-minded that is. And I know that I'm like, I mean, it's a miracle if anyone that disagrees with me is still listening to me, and that those words are emotionally reactive and cause people to be very defensive. But honestly, like, you think nobody else in the world is happy except for 1%, that 99% of the world is not happy.
That they have portions of truth. Maybe not all of it.
They don't know happiness, right?
And if you think that I don't know happiness by now, then the church hasn't done a good job of teaching me what happiness is. Like, if I'm able to be confused by the devil, then maybe I never knew what happiness was.
By following a Jesus that you probably learned at church, because I do think that Mormons, so many of them are good people, and a lot of the same very conservative Mormon values that
right.
I had. I just see them differently now. I still, like, I'm an atheist now, and I'm more moved to the left since I left the church. But the things I cared about keeping families together,
right.
are expressed in different ways. And it just sounds like those core values to what Mormonism raised you as, you're just living out to the fullest more now outside of the church, that you learned them there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
People don't realize that.
Nothing about my personality, about my core values has changed.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, it's just, and I understand I was in the same place. Like, that's why, I mean, we go back to like that post, right? About like, if you don't like BYU, then you can get out, and you're just a sinner, and you just want to wear, like, that's still me, right? Like, that is the same person. I just see it differently now. Like, I still care about families. I love my family. I want my family to be happy. I want to develop relationships with my family. That's important to me. I care about honesty. Like, I care about charity and serving, and I still actively serve, not in the church. And in fact, I serve more because I was raised with this mentality of like, oh, I don't need to give to you right now. I give at church. Mm-hmm. Where it's like, how is that person being served in this moment that's hungry and freezing, and me saying, oh, I give at church, that doesn't actually give back to you. It gives back first to itself, and then to its members if right. they're doing X, Y, and Z, and then to building malls, like, the fact that I would have ever assumed that was a valid answer instead of just giving that person what they need in that moment. Like, and I just wish that people could really understand, like, I followed Jesus out of the Mormon church.
Yeah, I think if I could get one message across, I swear it'd be that over and over again, how many times that kind of sentiment has been said. Like,
Yeah.
I followed Jesus, that guy, that homeless rabbi, like that was a good dude. I wanted to follow him.
Was a person of color.
Yeah,
Like,
he wasn't a white guy either.
he wasn't going to support white supremacy in any form. First of all, because he wasn't even white. And to only see yourself as a white American church in the Bible as like the chosen people, as the tribe of Israel it's just not even close to the truth.
Yeah. Have you ever heard that Gandhi quote where he's like, Christians, I like your Christ, but I don't like your Christians. Have you heard that Gandhi quote?
Yeah.
I kind of was like, can't disagree with that. You know, when I was a Christian,
true.
you know?
Exactly.
It's like, I know that our people can do better. So where do we go from here? What else was important on your faith journey that led you up to becoming a guest on Mormon Stories podcast?
I don't think I have any more to say, but pretty much I think we have covered. For me, the last straw was when I don't know if Makenzie, I don't know if you're the one who sent me that, but I don't know whose podcast is it, but they dive deep into Joseph Smith's vision and stuff, and that kind of just confirmed my doubt that I've had before, and then I didn't even know that there were different versions of it, you know. So that alone was just like, well,
The history of treasure digging and not using the plates.
Yes, and I didn't even know all those things about him, and
The names in the Book of Mormon being from stories that he read.
So that was the last nail to the coffin for me when I was like, well, you have been questioning this from day one, so here it is. Here are people who belong to this church who are analyzing this, and they are giving you different accounts of it, and they have the evidence, you know. And I was just like, okay, I'm just not going to subject myself to this kind of situation where I have to constantly convince myself maybe something is going to come up. Maybe I'm going to see the truth around the corner, you know. So I was just like, well, in Mackenzie's head, I think you had more like content that you were sharing with me that I wasn't like actively searching.
And I was like, read this. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, the first time she sent me the CS later, the PDF, she's like, read it and tell me what you think about it. And I was driving, and then you asked me like an hour later.
Did you read it?
And I was like, I'm
It's like 128 pages.
I'm driving.
You read it at every stoplight?
Yeah, I could tell how excited she was. I was like, whoa, this must mean a lot. So, well, I did, and I was just like, well, I am in shock. I don't know how to feel about this at this moment, but she was already like kind of ahead of me at this point. So, yeah.
And I just think it was more significant to me because that was my whole life that I had built on that. And so, I mean, for you, it was like discounting the last 5 years. But for me, it was like, oh, I'm changing this worldview that I've had for 27 years.
Yeah, which in itself was almost scary to me at some point. You know, I remember telling you that I feel like I've been fooled or something like that because I could not bring myself, I mean, to the fact that you were the one who were questioning this stuff way more than I was at that point, because I was like, so if she checked all the boxes like in Mormonism, like she was born there, which is what everybody was proud to say, like I was born in the church, you know, and then you went to a mission and then you came back and you went to BYU, you know, and I was just like, I don't know how to feel about this, you know. I was not expecting this from someone like you, and then at the same time it's really frightening how true it was, like to just realize how much of these, these things I've been believing in, my own self was questioning them without any evidence at all. For you to bring out more stuff that just like confirms those doubts, like, whoa, this is why you were feeling the way you were feeling. This same account you were questioning from day one, oh, here it is. Like, it does not make sense to a lot of people who were in this church. So there it is. So it took me a while to actually admit to her that, well, I finally left too. I was just like, I don't know how to feel about this. So I think for me, that's pretty much it. Like at that point, that's when I just decided to walk away. And also how, in addition to that, how other black people responded to me saying I'm Mormon. I was just kind of heartbroken because they were like, why? Like, do you know them? Like, because they did know about those, the racist part of
It's not
their.
imagined by members that want to leave or sin. It's real people that are not even in the church.
Who are not even in church
knowing.
are telling you, like, yeah, you mean you belong to that organization? I was just like, okay. So I finally decided to walk away, but it was a really hard decision to make because I thought I finally I found a place where I can feel safe, where I can grow spiritually, and surround myself with people who have the same goal and people who actually care about being Christ-like, only to be disappointed by how they act and how they respond to Christ-like things. So that really was painful for me to walk away from that after I had celebrated being in the church and being like, oh, well, I'm finally settling, like telling my parents about it and being all proud that I'm finally growing spiritually, and then only to be hit by, a ton of things that were dismantling my faith like that. I was like, well, this sucks. And it feels like I am not smart enough to pick this up. So I don't know if, I'm going to be able to believe again the same way I did. But I know it will take a while. We'll probably come out of it. But in that moment, that's how it felt like. So pretty much for my journey, that's when I was like, well, I'm done. I'm just going to be a person who try to be like Christ on my own. I'm not going to identify with this group of people who portray themselves as they are Christ-like, but their actions, they don't literally say the same thing.
So what was your parents' reaction when you told them that you were leaving the church? You just mentioned that like they were excited that you were joining to begin with because you were like investing in your spirituality just to leave it. So what was their reaction?
So that's like a sad part of my journey right now because
ongoing process.
Yeah, my dad died before I tell him that.
Oh, okay.
And I still kind of like gathering enough confidence to tell my mom about it because she has been through a lot this year and I don't know how to tell her in a way that she would understand exactly where I'm coming from and she's not going to associate it with how bad this year has been for her, because I felt like it was a lot for me to be like, oh, well, oh, dad died, or another thing. I thought I was making progress. I'm not, so I'm still kind of trying to bring myself around to the idea of, bringing around that conversation because ever since my dad passed, like, she's been, like, really, kind of trying to find comfort in her kids, and she's really like prayerful. She's that type of person who texts you like, hey, it's prayer time, I'm gonna pray, like, do you want to pray with me? So I feel like I will probably break her heart right now if I'm just like, well, I'm not really doing the exact same thing that you are assuming I am doing at the moment. So
trying to be thoughtful about it.
Yeah, and I want her to understand my journey and how it has been like for me, such that when I bring it to the point where I'm like, okay, so this is why I am no longer in church. It's not going to be, like a dagger into her heart or something like that, that is so painful for her, because she's kind of really vulnerable at the moment, and I don't want to add more insult to injury.
But that's just evidence too that like we haven't changed. You know, we're not doing the same things that we were doing, but the essence of who you are and what you value hasn't changed, so much so that your mom would never know, even that my parents would never know, like had I not told them. And even when I did tell them that I left the church, it was like, oh, well, we saw that you got a nose piercing and we saw that you weren't wearing your garments. So we knew something was wrong. But it's like, but if you were blind, would you have known? No. You know, if you didn't see those things, would you have thought that I was suddenly unhappy? I mean, that's just further evidence that happiness is not monopolized by the church. Because it's not like I became this depressed, angry, horrible, dishonest person that just, you know, like I'm the same person. And when I have been angry, it's been things that are pretty valid to be angry about. Like, yeah, I'm angry about injustice. I'm angry about kids dying and dying by suicide. And I'm angry by women feeling less than in the church. I mean, I joined so many Facebook groups that were like women that were struggling in the church that wanted to stay in the church and trying to support each other. And I tried so hard to stay and to find a place for me to be my progressive self and to stay. And even finding that community, it was like, oh, don't do that. Don't do that. You're associating with bad people or with people that are going to lead you a certain way. And if people could only understand like how hard I did try and how beneficial that group was for so long, to keeping me in the church longer, or how getting a nose piercing kept me in the church longer because I felt like I was making progress with my relationship with God. So it's so funny that these things that people notice and judge me for are so superficial, and that you would never know otherwise if I hadn't.
Yeah, if I didn't
done
tell,
those things.
If I didn't tell you, yeah.
So, yeah, we have the same values. We're just acting in a different way, but we ourselves are not different.
Didn't change at all.
How did things go when, I'm assuming you did tell your parents and you were that golden child? How have things been, and how did you tell them? And if you have any advice for like thumbs up, every listener do this, or like avoid this.
Yeah. It was devastating for them. I wanted to wait a year to tell them. I wanted to leave the church and not say, yeah. That was the arbitrary amount of time, and then tell them after, so that they could not say, oh, we've noticed changes, or we expected this, you know.
That's a good idea.
So I recommend it. I didn't tell them immediately. I mean, I left the church in May, maybe June, 2020, and didn't tell them until November. I mean,
don't do what I did. I told my parents the next day after I read all the truth claims. And I was like, let your emotions cool down for 365 days.
Yep. I mean, there's no right way for anyone, for sure. And it was really just, I gave in sooner because I wanted to support my siblings that are all living with my parents, and not all of them believe in the church. And I wanted them to be able to be authentic with my parents. And I knew that if I crushed them with the reality of the fall of their golden child, that my siblings would be able to talk to my parents and to be more authentic and save their relationship. Because I know I have siblings that just don't even spend time at home because they're, you know, asked to participate in scripture study or expected to go to church or things like that, and being preached to. Or so I wanted my family to be good and to be together. And so I decided to do that, and I wanted to tell them so that our relationship could be fixed. And so that, I was preventing further unraveling from me being just angry about the church and its members and therefore them. And I wanted to prevent that. And I wanted to make a safe space for our kids one day to be able to have their own nuanced ideas and for them to respect how we parent and how we live our life. And it's going to take some time to get used to that idea. So, so I told them in a group text to my mom and dad. And I was like, I love you. And I'm so grateful that you're my parents. And I really value how I've been raised, and I wouldn't change it. And it's because I love you and because I value our relationship that I'm telling you this. And I know it's going to be difficult for you. But I am having a really hard time with the church and its response of many of its members that I know and love, that you know and love. And it's just not a safe space for me to raise my family in. And I'm stepping away. And I hope that we can move past this and that we can still have a good relationship. My mom was more understanding. She cried, she grieved, and that's fair. Grieving the loss of the child she thought she had. And I understand.
I'm going to play John Dylan for a second. For all of our non-Mormon listeners, the John Dylan phrase. What, if you could explain to people, what is the idea around Mormon family theology, and what does it mean to have a child step away from the faith? What did that blow mean to your parents, to your family?
So to my parents, that means we would no longer be together in the next life, that I was breaking these covenants that I'd made, and that I must be confused because I know the church is true. I have known the church is true in my previous, years. And so something is terribly wrong with me. And this is potentially the worst possible news they could ever receive. Right. Short of death. I hope that my death would be more devastating. Just kidding. I'm being facetious. It would be.
Oh.
Especially if I died after I left the church.
Yeah. It's a spiritual death, though.
It is.
It's a death of what you can relate to, what you can talk about now. It's like a mourning for you and them of what you can even have in common now.
Yeah. And I admit that was such a huge part of my life, and it is such a huge part of their life. And I let them know I don't have any hard feelings against the church. I still want to hear about your life in the church and your experiences, and that's not going to change. All that's changing is me. And I did express concerns with their political affiliation, and that I did not feel like many of the conservative values were the values of Jesus, and that I was following the Jesus that I had studied in the Bible and had come to know myself, and that we just were no longer aligned. And that so that was a twofold affront on the identity in the church and the identity in conservative politics. And
in one text message?
In one text message.
Makenzie.
The day before the election day, which is just feel like I had to it's like the preacher in a wedding, and I just had to share my piece before.
Did you run out of characters?
Before the marriage occurred. What?
Did you run out of characters?
Did not run out of characters. They both have iPhones, so shame on them.
Just the scrolling made their arm tired.
Oh, it was. So I in hindsight, I wish I could have done it maybe face to face.
Was it emotionally charged? Is that why you wanted to get it done the day before the election? Do you feel like you were in a good headspace to do it?
Yeah, because I wasn't planning on doing it at that time, but I just was overwhelmed the day before the election, and I was like, I just have to say this. And the thing is, I respect different opinions. Like I don't personally have a problem with my parents associating with any party, even if it's different than me. But I did want them to acknowledge the horrible racist things that had been said. And I wanted to acknowledge like how women had been specifically targeted and spoken horribly against, and the misogyny that was there. And me just expressing, I have a problem with you supporting a person that shares these kind of ideas. And it makes me concerned to have children and bring children into your home that those ideas are just, maybe not, you're not saying them. I don't think that you're this kind of person, but they're on the TV, or
You're not the type of person that's going to call them out.
right.
Yeah. To bring that around their grandparents that I
Right.
don't know.
To bring Black children around parents that don't believe in Black Lives Matter, or don't believe in safe gun laws, or don't believe in treating women or immigrants with respect. I'm like, you realize
You're married to one.
yeah, but and I can handle it because I'm an adult and I know that those things aren't true, but bringing little children and just absorbing those ideas or it not being refuted is just horrifying. And they're going to hear it in the world, of course, but I would hope not from people that they love.
Yeah. Also, I think the other thing that you brought up was how like entertaining non-factual, things and theories because they support a certain political affiliation that you have was also part of the reason why that was frustrating, because Makenzie kept saying like, well, I don't expect this for someone who is as educated, who went to college, that you don't have these tendencies of just like, well, let's follow the facts, but you are like entertaining all these not true ideas.
Because all of the responses were, he didn't say that. That didn't happen.
And you just
and
like,
that's
there's
unequivocally
a video.
false. So I don't have a problem at the end of the day. I can get over the fact that you support an ideology that I don't agree with, but at least just admit that those things were said. You don't agree with them, but you agree with the policy above the person. But to sit there and tell me that those things didn't happen is deeply offensive. And even if those things weren't said or you don't agree with them, can you empathize with me and understand how if I do feel that way, if I do feel like someone is a white supremacist, even if they're not, can you see why that would be upsetting to like my own parents supporting that? Like, can you just imagine how that would make me feel? Even if I'm wrong, just acknowledge that that's where I'm coming from and that is scary. So it's differentiation is hard. And that was all I was asking for, is just being allowed to disagree on those things, but respect how I want to live my life, how I want to raise my children, and not call me confused or led away or any of these things, and not openly oppose my parenting styles and what we teach our kids. And
Differentiation is the name of the ex-Mormon game, may I just say. Whether you are in the church, out of the church, talking to somebody who's in the church, or ex-Mormons talking to each other. So again, I can hear the comment section anytime we get vaguely political or anything on the podcast. Differentiation is an important skill that I recommend for everyone, that Makenzie and Gerald can have their feelings and their perspectives about their lived experiences and their lens on the world. And you can differentiate from your perspectives without invalidating them or the things that they've just said that are like truly, truly close to their heart because of the places that they've come from, the color of their skin, the people they know, and the data that's available to them that is going to be different than some of our listeners. So just want to point out, comment section, please be kind, differentiation, practice it, know it, love it. So,
and of course I would love for everyone to agree with me. I mean, who wouldn't? Who doesn't want to be agreed with? But at the end of the day, all I wish someone would say that disagrees with me is saying, I could understand how that would make you feel. I could understand how if you really feel that someone is spreading dangerous ideas that would hurt your husband or your children, I could understand why that would be so scary for you and really hard for people that you love to agree with those ideas, or maybe not even those ideas, with someone who shares those ideas. I don't feel that they share those ideas, but I could understand that if you see it that way, why that would be hard for you. That's all. It's just like, believe someone's experience, believe someone's feelings when they tell you, because there's almost nothing that destroys relationships faster than invalidating someone's experience and saying, that's not true. That's not how you feel. That's wrong. You can't argue with how I feel.
Yeah, that's so good. I love the way you put that. And as we're starting to wrap up here, I want to make sure that I ask you where you've kind of landed, what helped you the most as you left the church. You mentioned Gift the Mormon Faith Crisis, those retreats that are on the Mormon Stories website, and they have their own website too. Invaluable, like 70 hours of free counseling. So you mentioned that. What other things kind of helped you and picked you up? And then where have you landed now, spiritually, religious wise? Like, both of you, you're individuals, so you can both answer that question. So
good to know.
You don't have to have the exact same answer. So
yeah, I really love Untamed by Glennon Doyle. It's been like my new
Bible.
My new Bible. I love Brene Brown. Really admire her and her work. Understanding the difference between guilt and shame and what is a useful tool, and developing an inner knowing and trusting yourself, and understanding differentiation and how to coexist with different ideas, and that's okay. And finding my own identity out of the church and redefining who I am and being okay with that, and just being confident with how I feel and my choices, and that's valid. So yeah, definitely. Glennon Doyle is my new cult leader.
oh, careful now.
I know.
And then
not flipping into that, but
your ideas about, sorry, we're going to say.
No, it's funny because I think people in the church that know us would not anticipate this, but I don't know where I land with Jesus, the existence of Jesus. I think that he was a real person. Can't speak to his divinity or the reality of him being a god or the literal son of God. I don't know if there is a God. I would consider myself very spiritual. I believe in like cosmic energy of there being some type of power. I'm sure my parents are like, oh, she's completely lost it. I don't know. And I'm okay with not knowing. I believe in the principles that Jesus taught, if he did exist, or that are ascribed to him. Mm-hmm. I continue to live by those principles. But it doesn't
like
charity, like serving the poor, caring about the poor, caring about equality. Equality of socioeconomic status, of gender, of members and non-members, spiritual and not, poor and rich. Yeah, everything. That's how people treat each other is how I judge my life, and that's how I judge other people, is how do you treat other people? And how can we make our country and our world a place that we treat people fairly? And that's what I spend my time and my money on, helping to contribute to. So I think I'm still doing Jesus's work, just not how other people are doing Jesus's work necessarily. So I'm still in the process of figuring out exactly where I land, and I'm not anxious about it. I'm just trusting myself and trusting that I know myself, and no one can say they know me better than myself. And no one can know what's better for me or what's good for me than me. So I am no longer outsourcing my authority to anybody else. And I do not need anyone else to tell me how to be happy or how to be fulfilled. So that's where I'm at.
Do another John DeLynn. Love it. Gerald, what about you?
For me, I cannot say really what am I using right now to help me go through this. I listen to pretty much the same podcast Makenzie listen to, and a bunch of others just
At a lower volume.
yeah, and I'm kind of focusing on more of like self-help and self-care, because I realized that I got detached with my inner self during the time that I made these decisions that I am kind of wishing that I did not make.
Me getting baptized.
Yeah.
You disconnected from your inner self.
From my inner self, yeah.
That's wow.
So I want to reestablish that connection, and I just want to work on listening to the little voice inside me that is always telling me to do good things in general. And I want to focus on the good principles, because I do believe that Jesus Christ was real. I do believe that he existed, but I have a problem with the version of Jesus Christ that other people portray. And I want more and more people to realize that not everything that is said about him is true. Some people say things to support a certain ideology they want you to believe about him, because it supports their doctrine, which they want you to believe, and you can join their institution. So that's where I'm at. Is I do believe that we as human beings, we have good spirit in us, and you can find goodness from within. So that's kind of the path that I am right now, is to focus on that spiritual part of us that literally doesn't dictate anything that is not good for us or good for the people that are around us. I want to love my neighbor, because Jesus, when he said that, he did not describe the neighbor, meaning anyone who is next to you or anyone you share a community with is your neighbor. It doesn't matter their skin color, their gender, their sexuality. You are just supposed to be there for them, because they can also be there for you. And that's the world that I'm trying to live in. That's the world that I am trying to make everyone see, that without each other, it does not matter if Jesus comes back or not. It's still a world of chaos. So I would say, as far as spirituality is concerned, I am working on that, on how can I bring goodness in the world at the same time, finding goodness within myself and working on that. That's the principle I want. If we ever have kids, I want them to understand that there's goodness in them, and if they focus on themselves and look hard enough, they can be good people. They can influence people around them to be also good, and they can be a blessing to others and themselves. Whether they have been taught a doctrine or not a doctrine, I believe human beings, we have more to offer to the world that is good, but only if we can invest our time and energy into finding that goodness within us. So I would just say that's the path that I am currently on. I don't want to teach anyone any sort of doctrine. I don't want to entertain any sort of doctrine. I don't care who's right or wrong, but goodness does not pick a side. We all love something that is good, and we can see why it's good, and we can benefit from it. So that's where I'm kind of trying to go with this. I don't want people to leave the church. If they are finding peace and happiness in the church, well, that's the place that you're meant to be. Stay there. if you are not finding peace and happiness, I don't want people to follow the same path that I feel like I've walked on, of doubting yourself and later on finding yourself in a position where you regret the time that you have lost, that you could have done a lot of good things with. So I would like people to just be happy with the decisions they make if they make them happy. If it does not make you happy, listen to the small voice, because 100% of the time it's right.
If it makes you happy and it's not hurting anyone, sounds good. Go for it.
Yeah, I
Kind of the end.
That's some beautiful wisdom from you to wrap up on. So if people want to reach out to you, to stay connected to you, if they love your story, do you have anything that you want to plug, or you can just remain anonymous? That's also a choice too.
So you want to talk about our podcast?
Oh, do we?
So
I haven't touched in a year.
we started a podcast, but we haven't put out as many episodes as we should.
So we got to have people poke you and prod you to do more.
Yes, so I would think from here going onwards, we are going to try to share more of our story of things maybe we did not.
Now that we're out in the open.
Yeah, things that we did not talk about on this podcast. We also have an Instagram page for that podcast, right?
Okay, what's its name? What's the name of your podcast?
Talking with the Benzis.
Talking with the Benzis.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's us.
So we will try to make it more professional now, and we will try to make more.
All of our followers that we're going to get from here.
Because we were not very serious about it. We were trying. Actually, we started that podcast because of our faith crisis, because we wanted to talk about hard things, and we wanted to bring people to the table so we can normalize these conversations where someone is like, hey, I'm struggling with spirituality, and I don't want to feel like people are going to judge me because of the decision I'm going to make, or anything else that we struggle to talk about as families. There are certain topics that are a taboo, or people are just comfortable saying well, we don't talk about that, which we feel like in our lives that contributed to where we are now, not in a good way. We wish certain things were talked about in our families. We wish certain things were talked about in our communities. So that's what
talking to each other helped us. And that's it. So we figured if other people can learn how to talk to each other.
Yeah. So yeah, we hope we can put out more episodes where we record ourselves.
We're sending people there. Okay.
Yeah, having these conversations.
If this 7 hours wasn't enough, because I know it's not, because it's not for me.
I know, nobody on earth wants to listen to us talk any more than we already have, but that's cute.
You'll be surprised. You'd be surprised. Everyone, comment below.
But I'm on Instagram. Ken's Curtis, actually. No, Kenzie Benzi. Is that my name? I don't know. You type in Makenzie Benzi, you'll find me.
Okay.
And then I have MakenziaBenzi.com because I am a life coach and I would love to help people through faith crises. But I'm also a speech pathologist, so reach out to me if you want speech therapy for your child.
Or yourself.
Yeah. So I think that's everywhere on the internet.
Check out the websites, check out their Instagrams, poke them and prod them to make more podcasts. I don't know a thing or two about podcasting, but the guy who normally sits here in this chair does. And he doesn't.
You know nothing.
Bam his mic all the time and drop his computer like I have this whole time. Is there anything else as we wrap up that you guys want to leave our listeners with? Any final thoughts, comments?
For me, I would just tell everybody that it's okay not to know things, and it's okay to question things. Uncomfortable things makes us grow. They don't dismantle us. So don't be afraid, to talk about uncomfortable things, and also just be brave. The world needs more brave people right now. We need people who can confront hard topics. We need people who can confront hard feelings. So don't be scared. You can be brave. You can do it. If you exist today, it means you are capable of a lot of things, and don't just say there's goodness in the world. Be the goodness.
I like that.
That was the most beautiful wrap up I've ever.
I know. You should have gone second.
Wisdom. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just wish
Top
that
it, Makenzie.
I wish that every Mormon and non-Mormon just knew how many people were going through this experience.
Right.
And if you are one of them, you are not alone. I wish I could explain to every family member that is upset with me or confused with me how any one of the people that I know and love and respect and that they respect is also going through the same thing. So it's so easy to judge me because I'm out and I'm doing things that you can easily tell do not align with the church, like a nose piercing, not murdering people or stealing from people, but things like that. And that there's so many more people that are not out, that are going through the same experiences that we are, and that this is a normal experience. It's such an integral part of human development and becoming an adult, to question what you've believed your entire life and to form new opinions and to grow together and take other experiences that you've never had and have that change your viewpoint. And it's so healthy and so normal. And I'm proud of us, and I'm proud that we have a marriage that we can learn and grow together. And yeah, I think that
Beautiful.
It's the best for everyone. And just have a little more empathy and have a little more understanding that there are more people than you know and will ever know that feel the same way that we do and are struggling, and how hard it is to leave the church. It's not something that we did because it was fun or because we wanted to sin. I mean, it's just being authentic to ourselves and doing the best we can in the best way for us. And that might look different for someone else, and that's okay. This is just how it worked for us.
Yeah. Incredible wrap up. And I hope that everyone else is going to not only push you to make more podcasts, and I hope the first one will be what it's like being a power couple, because that was so good. Do you guys think?
Thank you.
How to and what it's like being a power couple, basically, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I won't argue with you.
We'll
yeah,
give it a
I
try.
don't. We already know how that argument with the Adele song went earlier. I'm vicious, but I know I'm slightly right.
We will not bring up the Adele topic again.
I know. Not
We were
until-
always on Kara's side. Let the
Yeah.
record show.
Yep.
Thank you. Told you these are good people. All right. Well, I think that wraps up our completely epic 3-part Mormon Stories episode with the Benzis. What else rhymes with Benzi besides Makenzie?
What are the odds of that, first of all?
What are the odds of being a
me marrying the
Makenzie
one?
Benzi?
What else rhymes with Makenzie? I mean, nothing except for Benzi. One freaking dude in the entire world.
Selected out of Zimbabwe and
Yeah.
put into your heart.
I just want everyone to know that my parents did not name me Makenzie Benzi. They are not that evil.
Hey.
I just happened to marry you.
It was meant to be.
Yeah, something like that. Anyway,
I'd expect
it really
you
was.
to bounce in here with pigtails, like Mackenzie Benzie's here.
It's
wasn't
like a
quite that
nursery
image,
rhyme.
but-
I really should have a children's show
Yeah.
one day. We'll see.
Yeah, that's the name. But I'm sure as a speech pathologist working with children or whatever, Mackenzie Benzi.
Right?
That's
I
gonna be
mean,
adorable.
They would love to come to your office for real.
It's my theme.
Yeah. Is that hard for kids to say, by the way, Mackenzie Benzi?
It is.
It's another ironic one. It's got all the wrong syllables on it or whatever.
It's a mess, but it's fine.
Okay.
It works.
All right. Well, if you enjoyed this podcast with the Benzis, please, if you can, if it's in your budget, please go to MormonStories.org and become a donor. Watch me do a really proficient job at doing the donor wrap up that John always does, but he's not here, so I'm going to do it. So we lose donors every month, whether people move on or their budget changes, and we're like, hey, we understand. So if you get benefit out of this programming, no pressure at all to donate. But if you want to, please go hit the donate button at MormonStories.org. You can become a monthly donor or a one-time donor. Everything is tax deductible in the United States. All of our finances for the Open Source Foundation and the Mormon Stories podcast are completely, what's the word I'm looking for? Transparent.
Yes.
Transparency is key. So transparent, and we are trying to upgrade our staff and our lighting and our cameras. And huge shout out to Brooklyn and Gerardo and this guy John that also works here that makes this whole show possible.
I think we've heard of him.
Yeah, have you guys heard of that guy, John Delan? He's in here.
Just briefly.
He's usually like kicking around in the back, whittling sticks. I used a whittling stick joke already earlier, but it was off air.
It didn't count.
So if you appreciate this programming, please donate. And we really, really support your, we appreciate your support, whether it's just sharing or liking. And we are super grateful for every donation, but every view is also something that warms my cold, cold heart as well. So I have been your host, Kara Burrell, today. Please go easy on me, as Adele would say. With me. It's probably like the fourth time that I've hosted anything.
You did bring it up naturally.
I did.
I'm so proud of you. Gold star.
I hosted before I had a chance to have the world feel the world around me. Does that make sense? That made no sense, right? Anyway.
It made sense to me. I don't know if that's valuable to you, but right now, my approval.
Before this airs, we're the only 3 people in the room, so it makes sense. So we love you. We appreciate you. Thank you. Be kind to one another. Please share this. Please like it. And we tune in next time for another episode of Mormon Stories podcast. And thanks so much, everybody.